Gregory John Norman AO is an Australian professional golfer and entrepreneur who spent 331 weeks as the world's #1 ranked golfer in the 1980s and 1990s. He has won over 85 international tournaments in his career, including 2 majors, the Open Championship in 1986 and 1993. He is nicknamed the Great White Shark or sometimes simply the Shark, a reference to Norman's blonde hair, size, aggressive golf style and in reflection to the native coastal animal of his birthplace. Early years: Norman was born in Mount Isa, Queensland, Australia to Mervyn Toini Norman. His mother was the daughter of a Finnish carpenter, and his father an electrical engineer. As a youth, he played rugby and cricket and was a keen surfer. His mother was a fine golfer with a single-figure handicap. Norman began playing golf at 15, somewhat late for a world-class player. Naturally left-handed, he played golf right-handed. Within about 18 months, Norman went from a 27 handicap to a scratch handicap. Norman attended Townsville Grammar School in Townsville, Queensland, then moved on to Asperley State High School on the north side of Brisbane. Career: early professional career, 1975 Euro 1983, at the age of 20. Norman served as assistant professional under Billy McWilliam OAM at Beverley Park Golf Club in Sydney, New South Wales. His professional career had begun as Charlie Earp's trainee in the Royal Queensland Golf Club Pro Shop, earning $38 Australian a week. In 1976, Norman turned pro as a tournament player, and that year earned his first victory at the West Lakes Classic at the Grange Golf Club in Adelaide, South Australia. He joined the European Tour in 1977, and at his first victory in a European event that same season, the Martini International, at the Blairgowrie Club in Scotland. In 1980, Norman had an emphatic victory in the French Open, winning the tournament by 10 shots. He won the Scandinavian Enterprise Open in Sweden with a course record of 64 in the final round. Later in 1980, Norman won the Suntory World Match Play Championship with a victory in the final over Sandy Lyle. Norman also won his first Australian Open that year, his first of 5 wins in that event. In 1981, Norman finished in 4th place on his debut at the Masters in Augusta, finishing just 3 strokes behind the winner Tom Watson. Norman had a victory in the 1981 British Masters and he won his 3rd Martini International tournament that year by holing a 20-foot eagle putt on the last hole of a rain-saturated Wentworth Club course to finish a stroke ahead of Bernhard Langer. In 1982, Norman was the leading money winner on the European Tour. He won 3 European events that year, including successfully defending his British Masters title by an emphatic margin of 8 shots to break the tournament record-winning margin of 7 strokes by Tony Jacklin in 1973. The following year, Norman joined the US PGA Tour. In his first season on the PGA Tour in 1983, Norman had a runner-up finish in the Bay Hill Classic. American Mike Nicolette blew a 5-shot lead with 5 holes to play to tie over 72 holes with Norman. Nicolette won the playoff on the first extra hole with a par. Norman later said, "I am an aggressive player. I was trying to make the putt and I was a little too firm." Norman 3-putted for a bogey, missing a 6-foot par putt. 1984 Euro 1985, first US PGA Tour win. In June 1984, Norman won his maiden PGA Tour victory at the Kemper Open, winning by 5 strokes. He gained worldwide prominence a week later at the 1984 US Open. Norman holed a dramatic 45-foot putt on the 72nd hole to force a playoff with former Masters champion Fuzzy Zoella. At the next day's 18-hole playoff, Zoella had a very comfortable victory, beating Norman 67 Euro 75. On the second hole of the playoff, Zoella holed an improbable 68-foot birdie putt, while Norman had a double bogey 6 to fall 3 strokes behind. After 9 holes, Zoella led by 5 shots and he increased his lead to win by 8 strokes at the end of 18 holes. The 1984 US Open was the first of what would be numerous narrow defeats, unlucky breaks and unfortunate collapses in major championships throughout Norman's career. He was able to put the defeat behind him and win the Canadian Open in July for his second win of the year. The following week he lost in a playoff at the Western Open to Tom Watson. In 1985, Norman won the Toshiba Australian PGA Championship and the National Panasonic Australian Open. He had 2 runner-up finishes in the US PGA Tour that year, finishing tied for second place at the Canadian Open and at the Bank of Boston Classic. First major and the Norman Slam season, 1986. In 1986, Norman's many worldwide victories that year included 4 wins in Australia and 2 regular PGA Tour events. The Panasonic Las Vegas Invitational and the Kemper Open in a playoff on the 6th extra hole over Larry Mize, but 1986 is remembered for the Norman Slam or the Saturday Slam. Norman held the lead for all 4 majors through 54 holes. This meant he played in the final group for every major and had perhaps the best chance in history of winning the Grand Slam. Unfortunately for Norman, he was only able to win the 1986 Open Championship at Turnberry. At the 1986 Masters, Norman held the lead with Seve Ballesteros through 9 holes on Sunday. Norman double bogeyed the par 8 10th and fell out of the lead. With Norman seemingly out of contention, the focus moved towards Jack Nicklaus, Tom Kite and Ballesteros. By playing behind the leaders, Norman was able to rejoin the pack, impressively making 4 consecutive birdies on holes 14 to 17 to tie for the lead with Jack Nicklaus going into the final hole. Norman's tee shot on the par 8 18th finished in the middle of the fairway, but he pushed his 4-iron approach shot well to the right of the green into the spectators. He chipped his 3rd shot to the green, 17 feet from the hole. Needing to hole his putt for a par to get into a sudden death playoff with Nicklaus, Norman missed his putt and made bogey. Norman's caddy Pete Bender later said of Norman's 4-iron approach shot to the 18th, "Greg wanted 5 straight birdies. He wanted to make history. He wasn't going to go for the middle of the 18th green." At the 1986 U.S. Open at Shinnecock Hills, Norman again led after 54 holes, taking a 1-stroke lead over Lee Trevino and Hal Sutton into the final round. However, Norman faltered on the final day, bogeying the 9th and double bogeying the 13th for a round of 75 to finish 6 strokes behind the winner Raymond Floyd. Norman finally broke through at the 1986 Open Championship for his first major title. Norman shot a brilliant second round of 63 on Friday at Turnberry. On the 18th green, Norman was 28 feet from the hole, needing 2 putts for a round of 62, to break the record for the lowest ever round in major championship history. However, Norman 3-putted, missing a 6-foot par putt. His round of 63, which tied the lowest round in a major tournament, contained 8 birdies, an eagle, 3 bogeys and 6 pars. Only 15 players broke par in the second round. Tom Watson described Norman's feat as the greatest round ever played in a tournament in which I was a competitor. Norman survived the weekend's brutal conditions at Turnberry, with a final round of 69 to win the Open by 5 shots. After being presented with the Claret Jug Trophy, Norman said, "Outside of Australia, Britain was the first place that accepted me as a professional golfer. To win my first Open in front of the British public is the greatest feeling ever." Norman was again in contention at the PGA Championship, showing remarkable consistency during all 4 majors in 1986, the likes of which had not been seen since Bobby Jones in 1930. Once more Norman found himself in the lead at Inverness until he stumbled on Sunday again. A clear favourite for the title, he shot a 76. The tournament is famous for Bob Tway's hole out from the greenside bunker on the 72nd hole. Tway eventually won by 2 strokes over Norman. Norman's 4 wins in Australia in 1986 helped him to finish top of the Australian Order of Merit for the 5th time. He also topped the US PGA Tour money list for the first time that year. In September 1986, Norman won the Panasonic European Open at Sunningdale Golf Club, and the following month he had another victory in England, winning his 3rd World Match Play Championship at Wentworth. Norman ended 1986 with 10 worldwide victories and was officially ranked number 1 in the brand new official World Golf Rankings. Professional career. 1987 Euro 1990, at the 1987 Masters, Norman once again found himself tied for the lead at the 72nd hole. In his final round on the 18th green, Norman had a 20-foot putt for a birdie that would win the tournament. The ball trickled over the left lip of the cup, missing by millimeters. Norman later said, "I still don't know how the putt stayed out. I just couldn't believe it missed, nor could my caddy." After Norman's par on the 72nd hole at Augusta, he found himself in a sudden death playoff with Larry Mizen's Save Ballesteros. On the second playoff hole, with Ballesteros eliminated, Norman hit his approach onto the green with a chance at birdie. Mize on the other hand blocked his approach right of the green. Facing one of the most difficult chips on the course, Mize miraculously holed the 47-yard chip. Norman missed his birdie effort and came up short for the second year in a row. Norman later said, "I didn't believe it was possible to chip in from where he was. I just couldn't believe it." Norman had no wins on either the PGA or European 1987 tours. However, he won the Australian Masters in February 1987 and the Australian Open later in the year by a record 10 shots at Royal Melbourne Golf Club, beating the previous Australian Open record-winning margin of 8 strokes by Jack Nicklaus in 1971. Norman's 1987 victory at the Australian Open lifted him back above Save Ballesteros to the top of the official world golf ranking. Norman had another 4 wins in Australia in 1988. He finished tied for 5th place at the 1988 Masters tournament, with an opening round of 77 and a final round of 64, which tied the record for the lowest 4th-round score at Augusta. The following week Norman won the MCI Heritage Golf Classic at Hilton Head Island, South Carolina in April 1988, inspired by a leukemia-stricken teenager who got his wish to meet Norman and watch him play. He was only supposed to watch him for 2 rounds, but Norman arranged for him to stay until the tournament's completion, after which Norman gave him the winner's trophy. At the 1988 U.S. Open, Norman tore tendons in his left wrist when his 7-iron struck a buried rock during his second round. After experiencing further pain at the next hole, Norman withdrew from the tournament and the following month also withdrew from the 1988 Open Championship at Royal Lytham and St Anne's. He was inducted into the Sport Australia Hall of Fame in that year. At the 1989 Masters tournament, Norman came to the 72nd hole with a share of the lead, ultimately needing a par to make a playoff or a birdie to win. However, he missed a 12-foot par putt and bogeyed the hole, missing out on a playoff with Nick Faldo and Scott Hodge by 1 shot. Norman had another great chance at a major in 1989, this time at the Open Championship at Royal Troon. He played brilliantly in a final round of 64, starting his round with 6 straight birdies, to force his way into a playoff with Mark Calcavecchia and Wayne Grady. Norman and Calcavecchia came to the home hole, the 4th in a 4-hole playoff, level. Calcavecchia sliced his drive badly to the right, but was in a playable position. Norman hit a tremendous drive down the middle of the fairway. Unluckily for Norman, his drive bounced to the right and bounded into a fairway bunker 310 yards from the tee. After Calcavecchia hit his approach to 5 feet, Norman gambled from the bunker and the ball smashed into the bunker's face and limped into another. Norman thinned his next shot and the ball careered out of bounds. That was the end, as Calcavecchia took home the title. In 1990, Norman missed the cut at the Masters for the first time in his career. After shooting 2 rounds of 78-72 for a 6-over par 150, Norman spoke of his bewilderment and said that he was still in a daze. He said that prior to the tournament he felt relaxed and thought he would win his first Masters. In 1990, Norman did however win the Doral Ryder Open in marching Jack Nicklaus's Memorial Tournament for the first time. He also lost 2 tournaments in ways which directly echoed his losses to Mize and Tway, and further enhanced his reputation of being unlucky at winning golf tournaments. He was leading the Nestle Invitational in Orlando, Florida by 1 shot until Robert Gamez holed out a 176-yard shot over water on the 72nd hole to defeat Norman. Within a few weeks, Norman was tied for the lead at the USF&G Classic in Louisiana when David Frost holed out a greenside sand shot on the 72nd hole, to beat Norman by 1. In the 1990 Open Championship at St Andrews, Norman shot 66-66 in the first 2 rounds to give him a share of the lead after 36 holes alongside Nick Faldo. The 2 rivals were 4 shots ahead of the field after the first 2 rounds. However, Faldo shot a third round of 67 to Norman's 76. After the third round on Saturday, Faldo said, "Greg had a disastrous day. Nothing would go right for him and he didn't get any breaks." Faldo won the tournament by 5 shots and Norman finished tied for 6th place. Although 1990 was not the strongest year in the majors for Norman, he finished top of the PGA Tour money list that year for the second time in his career, along with winning the Vardon Trophy and Byron Nelson Award. Later that year he won the Australian Masters in his home country for a final and record 6th time. Professional career, 1991 to Euro 2009. In 1991, Norman missed the cut at the Masters for the second successive year. He had only one top 10 finish in a major in 1991, a tie for 9th place in the Open Championship at Royal Birkdale. In 1992, Norman admitted how much he had been hurt by his near misses in majors. He said, "I hid it inside me and wouldn't admit how much it hurt me. I was in denial." After a career slump in the early 1990s, Norman turned to Butch Harmon for help. Together, the two rebuilt Norman's game to top form by solving mechanical problems that had crept into Norman's swing. The new swing brought him great results, including his second major at Royal St George's in 1993. In ideal conditions, Norman defeated a star-studded leaderboard including Nick Faldo, Bernhard Langer and Corey Pavin. Norman returned a 64, the lowest final round by a winner in Open history. Gene Sarazen, who stood at the 18th green of St George's, later said of Norman's achievement, "I never thought I would live to see golf played like this." Norman's playing partner Langer also commented, calling it the finest round he had ever witnessed. Norman's cumulative score of 267 at St George's is, to date, the lowest winning aggregate in Open Championship history. The 1993 PGA Championship was again staged at Inverness. Norman had a final green putt of around 12 feet for victory that lipped right around the hole and failed to drop, and lost the subsequent playoff to Paul Azinger on the second sudden death playoff hole. At the PGA Championship, Norman became one of only 2 players to have competed in a Euro, and, like Craig Wood, to have lost a Euro playoffs in all 4 of the major championships. The following year, in 1994, at the Players' Championship, Norman obliterated the records for the lowest 18, 54 and 72 hole scores. After opening with a course record tying 63, he followed with 3 67s to give him a 24 under 264 total, 6 strokes better than any previous winner. Norman started 1995 with a third-place finish at the Masters, and again took the 54-hole lead at the U.S. Open. Even though he held the lead for most of the day, he was passed by Corey Pavin on the back 9. In June, Norman won his second Memorial Tournament, a victory that marked the beginning of one of his best years on the PGA Tour. After his win at the Cannon Greater Hartford Open, aided by a chip-in for eagle on number 14 in the final round, Norman overtook Nick Price as the number 1 golfer in the world. Later, he won the NEC World Series of Golf, holding a 70-foot birdie chip shot to defeat Price in a playoff on the first hole. He ultimately held the number 1 ranking for 331 weeks in his career. He also topped the money list for the 3rd time and was named PGA Player of the Year. 1995 is arguable Norman's greatest year even without winning a major title. The following year, Norman came into the 1996 Masters tournament having already won at the Doral Ryder Open. He opened his championship at Augusta with a course record equaling 63, which propelled him to the top of the leaderboard. He held the lead through 3 days for play. With 5 previous top 5 finishes at Augusta, and a 6-shot lead, Norman's long-awaited Masters victory seemed to be evident. In one of the worst meltdowns in major championship history, Norman took a 6-stroke lead into the final round and lost the tournament to Nick Faldo by 5 strokes, shooting a Sunday 78 to Faldo's 67. Norman's 6-shot lead at Augusta evaporated quickly with 3 straight bogeys on holes 9-11, and after Norman found water on the par March 12th hole, resulting in a double bogey 5, his playing companion Faldo had taken the lead. Norman tried to give himself a chance down the stretch, including an eagle chip on the 15th which lipped out of the hole, dropping Norman to his knees. Arguably the most infamous shot of his career was on the very next hole. A hooked tee shot into the water, ending any chance at victory. U.S. television channel ESPN, as part of their ESPN 25 25th anniversary celebration, ranked Norman's 1996 Masters disaster as the third biggest sports choke of the last 25 years. Norman was 1 stroke off the lead after 36 holes during the next major, but then faded on the weekend, finishing 5 shots behind eventual winner Steve Jones. In January 1997, Norman won his largest winner's check to date, $1 million, when he won the Anderson Consulting World Championship of Golf, making birdie on the last hole to defeat Scott Hodge in the 36-hole final. Norman then won 2 tournaments in 1997, but they were his final victories on the PGA Tour. In 1998, Norman missed part of the season after suffering hip and shoulder injuries. Norman did make one more run at the Masters in 1999, battling Jose copyright Mara Olazabal on the final day, and even briefly leading the tournament after an eagle on 13, before fading to finish third behind the winner Olazabal and Davis Love 3. It was Norman's 6th top 3 finish at the Masters and his 8th top 5 finish at the tournament. In July 2008, despite not playing in a major for 3 years, Norman finished 9 over par in a tie for third at the Open Championship after being the 54-hole leader by 2 strokes. He set the record in becoming the oldest 54-hole leader in a major championship and earned an automatic bid to the 2009 Masters. Norman missed the cut with a 4 over par 40 on the final 9 holes with a 5 over 77 for the second day. His trip to the Masters was his first since 2002. Norman played his warm-up to the 2009 Masters tournament at the Shell Houston Open on the PGA Tour at the Redstone Golf Club, where he made the halfway cut. It was only the 4th cut he has made on the PGA Tour since 2004. Though neither was in a major or PGA Tour event, Norman had 2 notable face-offs with Tiger Woods. At the 1998 President's Cup at Royal Melbourne Golf Club in Australia, Norman and Woods played a close match, with Woods winning 1-up. Under different circumstances, this could have been a very significant match beyond the star power involved, but since the international team won by a lopsided margin over the US team, this match had little effect on the final result, though it was a riveting match between the former and current number 1 players in the world. Norman got payback of a sort in the 2001 Skins game, in which he not only defeated Woods, he also was the only person in Skins game history to sweep all the prize money and leave the other players empty-handed. This was the only year that the Skins game was contended under the controversial validation format. Champions Tour, Norman turned 50 in February 2005, but has kept his distance from the senior golf circuit. Partly this is because of his other interests, but also because of back and knee injuries. In 2003, Norman said, "Hitting about 4 million golf balls has created unfortunate wear and tear." He had knee surgery in October 2005 and February 2006. Norman believes his back injuries could have been averted had he been introduced to the concept of golf fitness early in his career. In May 2008, Norman played in only his 3rd Champions Tour event since turning 50, the 69th Senior PGA Championship at Oak Hill Country Club. Norman, having not played competitive golf regularly in the last several years, stayed in contention all week and wound up 3 shots behind eventual winner Jay Haas, tying for 6th place. His wife at the time, tennis legend Chris Evert, had been a large part of Norman's consideration to enter events on the PGA and Champions Tours. "I would doubt he'd go back full-time," Evert said. "But for him to keep it up, 1 or 2 tournaments a month or whatever, would be great. I would 100% support him if that's what he wanted to do." After Norman's surprise success at the Open Championship, he continued his strong play, finishing in a tie for fifth at the Senior British Open Championship and fourth in the US Senior Open after being the only player to shoot 72 or lower all 4 days. He finished 2008 playing in 4 majors and finishing in the top 10 in all of them. In the 2009 Senior British Open Championship, he held the 54-hole lead after playing 3 consistent rounds, but faltered on Sunday to finish tied for 6, 3 shots behind eventual winner Loren Roberts. Career achievements and legacy. Norman has earned more than $1 million 5 times on the US PGA Tour, including 3 Arnold Palmer Awards as the tour's leading money winner in 1986, 89 and 95. He was also the first person in tour history to surpass $10 million in career earnings. He has 30 top 10 finishes in majors, or more than 38% of those he has entered. In 2004, Norman said, "I just wanted to be as good as I could be. I work hard, I push myself hard, and I probably even expect too much of myself." Norman's dominance over his peers was probably best expressed in the official World Golf Rankings. Norman finished the season on top of the ranking list on 7 occasions, in 1986, 1987, 1989, 1990, 1995, 1996 and 1997, and was second at the end of 1988, 1993 and 1994. Norman won the PGA Tour of Australia's Order of Merit 6 times, 1978, 1980, 1983, 1984, 1986, and 1988. He won the European Tour's Order of Merit in 1982, and topped the PGA Tour's money list in 1986, 1990, and 1995. He won the Vardon Trophy for lowest scoring average on the PGA Tour 3 times, 1989, 1990, and 1994. And was inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame in 2001. In 1986, Norman was awarded the BBC Overseas Sports Personality of the Year award, a feat he replicated in 1993 to join Muhammad Ali as multiple winners of the award in 2007. Norman was elevated to legend status in the Sport Australia Hall of Fame. He received the 2008 Old Tom Morris Award from the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America, GCSAA's highest honor, at the 2008 Golf Industry Show in Orlando. Norman is a member of the Environmental Institute for Golf's Board of Trustees and also chairs the Institute's Advisory Council. He was also the recipient of the Golf Writers Association of America's 2008 Charlie Bartlett Award. In 2009 Norman was inducted into the Queensland Sport Hall of Fame. In 2012, Norman suggested that the best golfers in the world tend to have a 15-year cycle at the top of the game. He said that he knew his days as the world's leading golfer were drawing to an end with the emergence of Tiger Woods in 1996. Norman has been a spokesman for companies including General Motors Holden, which developed a Commodore model named after him. His own business's interests include McGregor Golf and Greg Norman Golf Course Design. Although he continues to play tournaments, his growing business interests take up an increasing amount of his time. His personal wealth is estimated to be in the hundreds of millions of US dollars. Playing style. Norman had a bold and aggressive style of play. He is widely regarded as one of the greatest drivers in golf history, and perhaps the greatest of his era. In the 14 seasons between 1984 and 1997, Norman finished in the top 20 in total driving on the PGA Tour 12 times and in the top 6 9 times. When driving long and straight off the tee with a persimmon cliphead in his prime, Norman intimidated many of his fellow professionals. His high ball flight enabled him to carry the ball very long distances. In 2009, Nick Price said, "The best driver I ever saw was Greg Norman." However, with the advent of the metalwood by TaylorMade and other subsequent advances in golf ball and golf club technology, Norman's dominance was significantly diminished, as the new technology enabled less precise ball strikers to achieve equal or better accuracy and distance. In 1991, Norman was the second longest driver on the PGA Tour's driving distance statistics. Just 6 years later, by 1997 however, Norman was tied for 75th place as the longest driver on the PGA Tour, an indication of the significant impact that the new metalwood technology had made on many of Norman's rivals to achieve better driving distances than his as he entered his early 40s. Norman's bold attacking style of play was rewarded with 2 rounds of 63 in major tournaments, at Turnberry in 1986 and at Augusta in 1996. Other sparkling rounds from Norman in majors include his 64 at Royal Troon in 1989 and a 64 at Royal St George's in 1993. Both of Norman's major victories came at the Open Championship. In 2009, a year after finishing tied for 3rd place in the British Open at the age of 53, Norman said that he believed links golf gives a better player an opportunity to do well because he has more of a repertoire of shots in his mind. Norman said, "The younger generation nowadays that grew up with the modern technology haven't had the ability to teach themselves how to play certain shots." Other ventures, Norman's hobbies include offshore game fishing. He has owned a succession of increasingly large and luxurious boats for the purpose. He even described his ugly 1993 PGA Championship loss in fishing terms: "This was a mackerel in the moonlight, shining one minute, smelly the next." He became a wine lover in the 1970s while playing at tournaments in Europe. Based in Hobe Sound, Florida, USA, he typically plays only 1 or 2 tournaments per year in Australia. Charity: Merrill Lynch Shootout is a team golf event hosted by Greg Norman. The event is played at the Tiburon Den Golf Club in Naples, Florida. The shootout benefits Cure Search National Childhood Cancer Foundation. Greg Norman Golf Foundation. The Greg Norman Golf Foundation was formed by Greg Norman and his father Merv Norman in 1987. The foundation provides professional guidance and instruction throughout Queensland to school students and those in other educational establishments, children with specific physical disabilities and junior members of golf clubs. The Environmental Institute for Golf, the philanthropic arm of the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America, is a collaborative effort of the environmental and golf communities, dedicated to strengthening the compatibility of golf with the natural environment. In January 2003, the institute evolved from the GCSAA Foundation, originally established in 1955, with a new name, mission and focus. The institute concentrates on delivering programs and services involving information collection, research, education and outreach that communicate the best management practices of environmental stewardship on the golf course. Broadcasting: on April 23, 2014, Fox Sports announced that Norman would join Joe Buck as its lead commentary team for its coverage of the USGA's championships beginning in 2015. Enterprises: Great White Shark Enterprises is a multinational corporation headed by Greg Norman with offices in Jupiter, Florida, USA and Sydney, Australia. The company's interests are primarily focused around golf and the golf lifestyle. Golf course design: Norman has devoted much of his time to golf course design and established his Greg Norman Golf Course Design in 1987. GNGCD has completed more than 70 golf courses on 6 continents. Tens of thousands of players play his courses daily, from total newcomers to semi-professionals. Some courses have received the Audubon Society Award for Environmental Stewardship. Environmentalists and scientists have been critical of the environmental impact of other of these designs. In Lau Lau Bay, a survey reports that after 20 years of construction, several negative impacts to the nearby environment have appeared, including destruction of the coral reefs. This is mostly in part to nearby road construction and not the golf course itself. Medalist Developments: Medalist Developments is a multi-award-winning residential developer which specializes in amenity-focused lifestyle communities. Medalist was formed in 1997 as a joint venture between Greg Norman's Great White Shark Enterprises and Macquarie Group Limited. Southern Cross Developments: Southern Cross Developments International is a real estate development and investment company specializing in the use of branding, lifestyle positioning and capital structuring to differentiate and enhance real estate. Southern Cross was founded by Greg Norman, Jeremy Seabridge and Brett Walsh and operates out of the Florida headquarters of Great White Shark Enterprises. Southern Cross is the exclusive licensor for Greg Norman in residential real estate applications, including the Norman Estates, by Greg Norman, Norman Residences, and Norman Club Villas brands. Turf Company, established in 1995, Greg Norman Turf Company licenses proprietary turf grasses for golf courses, athletic fields and home lawns. GNTC owns the exclusive rights for GN1 Hybrid Bermuda grass, which has been its main product. It also was the turf of choice for Super Bowl XXXIII in Miami and XXXV in Tampa, the 1999 World Series and the 2000 Summer Olympic Games at Stadium Australia. Greg Norman Turf Company is a charter member of the Southern Seed Certification Association, Wine Estate, during Norman's first trip to the United States in 1976, when he was chosen to represent Australia in the World Cup of Golf in Palm Springs. He soaked up as much of the culture as he could, including trying California's wines. In the 1990s, Norman partnered with winemakers from Baringo Bluffs to launch Greg Norman Estates wineries. Greg Norman Australian Prime. In 2006, Norman in Australia's leading beef producer, Australian Agricultural Company, announced the formation of a venture to develop and export a line of Greg Norman branded premium steaks and beef products. Greg Norman Australian Prime produces an export line for food service and retail sales starting with two selections, Greg Norman Signature Wagyu, a super premium steak produced from 300-day fed Wagyu cattle, and Greg Norman Premium, produced from 130-day grain-fed cattle. The brand is now offered in the United States through GNAP's U.S. importer and master distributor, Broadleaf USA. Valderrama Golf Course. In September 2010, the Stripe Group, co-owned by Norman, purchased the Valderrama Golf Club, in Sotogrande, Spain. GSH Investments. On October 26, 2011 it was announced that the Greg Norman Lead Management and Investment Consortium GSH Investments purchased the Master Associate position at Max International, estimated to be a multi-million-dollar amount. Max International is a direct selling company whose owners include Bill Guthrie and Greg Rinker of Guthrie Rinker. The product line focuses on technology developed by Dr. Robert Keller and Dr. Herbert T. Nagashima which raises levels of glutathione in the body. Greg Norman Champions Golf Academy. On August 21, 2012 in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Greg Norman Champions Golf Academy held the grand opening for its headquarters and what may be the first of several academies. The 10,000-square-foot facility, the second largest of its type in the United States, is located at Barefoot Resort, where he designed the Norman course, and where Norman opened Greg Norman's Australian Grill in 1999. Norman also designed the Reserve Club at nearby Pawleys Island, and his name went on the Long Bay Club Academy in 2010. Autobiography. Norman released his autobiography, titled The Way of the Shark in 2006. Personal life. On March 15, 1997, then U.S. President Bill Clinton fell down a flight of stairs at Norman's Florida home, tearing knee tendons which required surgery. While married to Laura, Norman commissioned the 228-ft luxury yacht Aussie Rules, built by the Australian ferry builder Austal Oceanfirst. The boat held 4 sports boats, including a 60-ft custom sport fisherman, along with stowage for related gear, 200 rods. Built of aluminium, she cruised at 15 knots with a range of 8,000 miles. The boat cost $70 a million, but resulted in Austal making an $18 a million loss. The boat was quickly sold by Norman in 2004 for a rumored $77 a million to the founder of Blockbuster Video, Wayne Huizenga. Norman was also an early customer for the Boeing business jet, which he had ordered with custom-fitted bedroom and office. However, the downturn in the Asian markets adversely affected his golf course design business, and he later cancelled the order after acting as an ambassador for Boeing. He eventually retained his Gulfstream V in September 2014. Norman was admitted to hospital after almost losing his left hand in a chainsaw accident. Norman had been cutting back mandrakes at his Florida home. Marriages. Norman had a brief romance with British tennis player Sue Barker before he met Laura Andrassy. an American flight attendant. Norman married Andrassy on July 1, 1981. They have 2 children, Morgan Lee, and Gregory. Gregory is a business management and organization major student at the University of Miami. Gregory also played with his father in a father-son team at the 2008 ADT Skills Championship in Aventura, Florida. The family lived in Hobe Sound, Florida. In May 2006, Norman announced he and his wife would divorce. He refused to comment on the reasons for this, other than to say there was no third party involved. In November 2009, the divorce settlement was finally reached, which would provide Laura Andrassy with a total of $105 million. In September 2007, Norman announced he and American former tennis champion Chris Evert would marry. The couple became engaged on December 9, 2007 and on June 28, 2008 were married in a lavish multi-million-dollar event in the Bahamas. On 2 October 2009 Evert and Norman announced they were separating, saying in a statement that they will remain friends and supportive of one another's family. Norman filed for divorce on December 8, 2009 at a courthouse in Florida. In October 2010, Norman announced his engagement to interior decorator Kirsten Kuttner. The couple married on the weekend of November 6, 2010 on Necker Island. Professional wins, PGA Tour wins, PGA Tour playoff record, European Tour wins, European Tour playoff record, PGA Tour of Australia wins, 1976 West Lakes Classic, 1978 New South Wales Open, Traralgon Classic, Coltex Festival of Sydney Open, 1980 Australian Open, 1981 Australian Masters, 1983 Australian Masters, Stefan Queensland Open, National Panasonic New South Wales Open, 1984 Victorian Open, Australian Masters, Australian PGA Championship, 1985 Toshiba Australian PGA Championship, National Panasonic Australian Open, 1986 Stefan Queensland Open, National Panasonic New South Wales Open, West End Jubilee. South Australian Open, National Panasonic Western Australian Open, 1987 Australian Masters, National Panasonic Australian Open, 1988 Palm Meadows Cup, ESP Open, PGA National Tournament Players Championship, Panasonic New South Wales Open, 1989 Australian Masters, PGA National Tournament Players Championship, 1990 Australian Masters, 1995 Australian Open, 1996 Ford South Australian Open, Australian Open, 1998 Greg Norman Holden International, Japan Golf Tour wins, 1989 The Crowns, 1993 Sumitomo Visa Taiyo Masters, other wins, 1977 KUZUHZ International, 1978 South Seas Classic, 1979 Traralgon Classic, Hong Kong Open, Queensland PGA Championship, 1980 Suntory World Match Play Championship, 1983 Hong Kong Open, Cannes Invitational, Suntory World Match Play Championship, Kapalua International, 1985 Alfred Dunhill Cup, 1986 Suntory World Match Play Championship, Alfred Dunhill Cup, PGA Grand Slam of Golf, Frederick Mayer Challenge, 1993 PGA Grand Slam of Golf, 1994 PGA Grand Slam of Golf, Wendy's 3-Tour Challenge, 1995 Fred Mayer Challenge, 1996 Fred Mayer Challenge, 1997 Frederick Mayer Challenge, Anderson Consulting World Championship of Golf, Telus World Skins Game, 1998 Franklin Templeton Shark Shootout, 2001 Skins Game, Major Championships, Wins, Results Timeline, DNP equals did not play, WD equals withdrew, cut equals missed the halfway cut, T indicates a tie for a place, green background for wins. Yellow background for top 10. Summary, most consecutive cuts made a Euro 18, longest streak of top 10s a Euro 3, team appearances, World Cup, 1976, 1978, Hennessy Cognac Cup, 1982, Dunhill Cup, 1985, 1986, 1987, 1988, 1989, 1990, 1992, 1994, 1995. 1996, Nissan Cup, 1985, 1986, Kirin Cup, 1987, Fortours World Championship, 1989, President's Cup, 1996, 1998, 2000, see also, List of celebrities who own wineries and vineyards, List of golfers with most European Tour wins, List of golfers with most PGA Tour of Australasia wins, List of golfers with most PGA Tour wins, List of men's major championships winning golfers, Sanctuary Lakes Resort, The Vintage Golf Course, references. External links, official website, Greg Norman at the PGA Tour official site, Greg Norman at the European Tour official site, Greg Norman at the Japan Golf Tour official site, Greg Norman at the official World Golf Ranking official site, Greg Norman on About.com profile and stats.